Welcome to the local campaign. Thank you for joining us on Rogers TV. Our debate today is in the riding of Carleton. I'm going to introduce the candidates to you in just a moment, but first let's go over the rules for our debate today. I am going to introduce each of the candidates, and then they will each have 60 seconds, 1 minute, to provide an opening statement. The order for those opening statements was drawn at random just before we began our telecast. Then we'll move into a series of debates about the important topics in the riding of Carleton and throughout the province of Ontario. To start each discussion, I'm going to direct a question at one of the candidates. That candidate will have 45 seconds to respond to the question on his or her own, and then we'll open it up to several minutes of debate from amongst all the candidates. At the conclusion of that discussion, we'll go back to the candidate to whom the question was originally directed, and he or she will have 30 seconds to wrap up on that topic. We'll move through several different discussion topics that way, and then we'll wrap up with closing statements in the reverse order of the opening statements. Once again, they will be 1 minute in length. So let's meet the candidates who are here vying for your votes in the June 7th provincial election campaign in the riding of Carleton. First is the Liberal candidate, Teresa Kadri.
Hello, Mark.
All right. Second, the Libertarian candidate. We also have Goldie Gamora, the Progressive Conservative candidate. Jay Tizik is representing the Ontario Party. Representing the Green Party is Gordon Kubek. The NDP candidate is Courtney Potter. We have an independent candidate running in the riding, that is Mark Dixon. And finally, from the None of the Above party, Evan Nightingale. And there is one other candidate who is on the ballot on June the 7th, who is not with us for the debate today. That is Kevin Harris from the Cultural Action Party. So let's begin with the opening statements, and we will start with Liberal Party candidate Teresa Kadri. Go ahead, you have 1 minute.
Thank you, Mark. Hello, and hello, fellow candidates. I'm Teresa Kadri, your Liberal candidate for Carleton riding. I am running for office because I want to bring your needs, your concerns, and your suggestions to Queen's Park. I want to be your voice when it comes to things that matter to you and your family. There are times in the life of a family where the government needs to step up so that families can continue to thrive. Families are telling me that they need additional support. I personally want to make sure that young families and the aging population in our riding are cared for and supported. We have introduced free Medicare for those over 65 and young adults under 25. I will work with my fellow MPPs to include additional medications not presently covered. I will work to bring free daycare in sooner and at an earlier age. I will work to see additional supports for children and youth with special needs. Care, not cuts.
Thank you. Jean-Serge Buisson is the Libertarian Party candidate. You have 1 minute. Go ahead.
Thank you. I have represented the Libertarian Party for many years and many times, different elections. But this is the first year that we have come very close to running a full slate. We've gone from 74 candidates in the last provincial election to 117. Why is the reason for that growth? Because people are fed up with big, bloated governments. Libertarians are all about running a government that is slim and efficient. And for the last 15 years, that's the last thing that we've seen from the Ontario Liberal Party. So if we are able to garnish enough votes to affect, we're definitely not going to make government, but if we can garnish enough votes to affect the platforms of the ruling government, that it will be our goal. So we hope that you will consider this party as an alternative to the other parties. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next is the Progressive Conservative candidate, Goldie Gamora. Go ahead.
Well, first of all, Mark and Rogers TV, thank you for having us here today. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Goldie Gamora, and I'm proud to be your local Ontario PC candidate for the riding of Carleton. I'm 33 years old. I'm a trade and business lawyer. I've been on several boards, including Vice President of the Ottawa Community Immigrant Services Organization and the Women's Business Network. And I'm here today because after 15 years of Liberal waste, mismanagement, and scandal, we need a change. When I look at what the Liberals have done in the past 15 years for young families, people like myself, they have done absolutely nothing. And for the past 2 years, I've been campaigning across the riding of Carleton, listening to you, the people, and learning about the issues that matter to you. And today I'm going to show you why I'm the best person to be your voice at Queen's Park. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Representing the Ontario Party is Jay Tizik. Go ahead, you have 1 minute.
Thanks, Mark. I'm Jay Tizik, the candidate for the Ontario Party. I've spent most of my life as a businessman. I've built a lot of businesses and run them. I've run a communications company, manufacturing company, restaurant, and I also am a father, which is really important to me. I think that's probably my biggest role as a father to 3 children and a husband to my wife, Erin. And I've seen a government that doesn't respect our businesses, doesn't respect our families. I've become disgusted with party-centric politics, which have robbed our families and disrespected our businesses just to buy votes in Toronto. What we need is real local representation for the families of this riding. I grew up in this riding. My friends are here. They're raising their families and building their businesses. Those who know me know I'm a fighter, and I want to be your fighter at Queen's Park to represent you. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next up is the Green Party candidate, Gordon Kubek.
Good morning. My name's Gord. I'm the proud father of 3 lovely daughters. I've been an engineer, I've been a school teacher, and now I'm a beekeeper and on the board of the Club of Rome in Canada, an environmental think tank. There's 2 issues that I'd like to focus on that I think are in crisis: our unsustainable provincial debt and the environment. They're linked. They're linked in this way. We've put off making tough decisions, and now that our children are going to have to pay for in the future. This has brought us to the point where we now have the largest sub-sovereign debt in the world at $348 billion. Also, in Ontario, just this past year, over 70% of our honeybees died. Clearly, the evidence tells us that we've exceeded both our economic and environmental limits. What we need to do instead is work within our limits to develop an economy that values quality over quantity. I challenge you to be part of the solution to these and other challenges this June 7th. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's meet now the NDP candidate, Courtney Potter.
Thank you. My name is Courtney Potter, and I'm the NDP candidate for the riding of Carleton. As a student and a young worker, I understand how difficult it is to manage rising everyday expenses as wages stay stagnant. As the NDP candidate, I will fight to bring better services to the citizens of Carleton, including universal farmer care, dental care, and affordable child care. I will also advocate for better protection for workers in precarious job situations, such as part-time, temporary, and contract employment. The NDP put forward a budget that pays for these through new revenue sources, not through cuts to services that Ontario citizens have come to rely on. Through the past couple of years, we have seen the Liberals and the Conservatives advocate for change through privatization. But we have noticed that privatization only leads to lower quality services and more money out of Ontarians' pockets. That's why we need an NDP government to reinvest in public services.
All right, thank you. Next up is an independent candidate, Mark Dixon. Go ahead.
Thank you for having me here today. My name is Mark Dixon. I am an independent candidate, but please remember that I am a card-carrying member of the Progressive Conservative Party of Ontario. I have supported Doug Ford before he was elected, and I fully support him now. And I must legally run as an independent because my opponent has the nomination as the nominated candidate, and I have respect for her. However, I seek to be elected as an independent so that I would not be subject to whip voting. As an independent, I may fully support and do support the Progressive Conservative Party of Ontario. I'm also a member of the Conservative Party of Canada. We need to have a strong government. We need a government that is going to be fiscally responsible.
Okay, that's time. Thank you. Finally, representing the none of the above party is Evan Nightingale. Go ahead.
I'd like to thank my fellow opponents for joining me today. I'd also like to thank everyone at Rogers TV for hosting us and having the democratic integrity to invite the lesser-known candidates. I grew up in Richmond and went to school in Stittsville. As a none of the above member, I seek to make comprehensive reforms to our democratic system to hold our government more accountable and improve the ease in which constituents can influence legislation. Ontarians should not have to begrudgingly vote for a party they partially agree with or dislike the least. We need to change our system. We seek to make the Ontario government accountable to its voters by pushing election legislation that would allow citizens to vote in referendum for individual bills proposed by the Assembly. We also seek to give Ontarians the right to dismiss their representative at Queen's Park by petitioning for their recall in an immediate by-election. Lastly, we want election reforms that will end the favoritism of the same old parties and will make our elections more transparent.
Thank you. All right, you have met the candidates. Now let's get into some of the issues. I'm going to begin by directing a question to Teresa Caudry, the Liberal Party candidate, and you'll have 45 seconds to respond to this. Then we'll open it up to some debate and discussion. You are new to provincial politics. You're not running for re-election, but your party has been in government for the past 15 years. I don't think there's any question that one of the central issues of this campaign is the current government's record and whether it's time for a change. So why should voters re-elect a Liberal government after all of the controversies and scandals of the past few years?
First of all, thank you, Mark. I believe, and I know it's a fact, the Ontario economy is one of the strongest in the world. We're leading the nation in economic growth and outpacing the G7 countries. Our economy has grown over 1 million jobs since recession. In the last year alone, we created 200,000 jobs in Ontario. It's really important to know that this is a time that Canada and Ontario are placed very, very high in the world. We don't want to lose that. And care is so important versus cuts. It really means that you're going to lose jobs with cuts. It really means that everybody will lose. Healthcare will lose. Everyone will lose.
Okay, it's open to everyone now.
You stated that you created jobs in the last few years, but how many of those jobs were precarious? Part-time, low wages, or contract work that people didn't really want, but didn't classify them as employees?
So you're directing that directly at me?
Yes,
so I have to say that it's 200,000 jobs that have been created. It's the lowest unemployment in the history of Ontario. So that basically answers your question.
I'd like to say that, well, what we hear is true. The problem is that we've done this at a time when our economy is growing, and yet we go further in debt. This is clearly unsustainable. So what, as a Green Party, we want to make sure that if we spend money, we do it in a way within our means. And right now, we're putting a burden on our future. The classic cynical political move was when we had our hydro rates cut 25%. You need to know that all of that money is borrowed money, and what that's going to do in the future, because you're getting a savings today, because in the future you're going to have to pay at least $21 billion more just in interest payments. That's been a typical, basically trying to buy your vote Liberal approach. It worked for them with the gas plants in Toronto when they shut them down. $1 billion, boom, our prices went up. The same thing has happened with the Hydro One sell-off. There's all this talk by Doug Ford that he's going to fire. I'm jumping to the PCs now. It's the same philosophy. We're now going to, fire everybody in Hydro One. Well, the Liberals made it 53% private. You can't fire them. You can't sell it off. It's now a privately public company. So all this talk by the Conservatives, oh, we're going to come to the rescue after this Liberal debacle, it's just not true.
Let's be very clear.
It's not possible.
Here, sir. Let's be very clear. Doug Ford has not said that we're going to fire everyone at Hydro One. The fact of the matter is, we are going to get rid of the $6 million man, and we're also going to look at the board, and we're going to see what we can do with the board of directors, because quite frankly, in this day and age, when people have to choose between heating and eating, and when I have driven up and down Dwyer Hill Road and Donnelly Drive and all across rural Carleton, and I have met seniors who are living on their own, and they are, pensioners, they have a single income. Excuse me, Teresa, please let me finish.
Well,
Teresa,
you interrupted the Green Party gentleman over there, Goldie. I think that, it's very important that you also relate the investment that the Liberal Party is going to put in for the seniors.
The
keeping
investment
seniors
is
at
not there
home is
because
really
there's no
important.
money. The province
I
is
took
bankrupt.
care of my
There's time for
mother.
everyone.
All right,
so
can I
Goldie,
finish my...
Gamora, go ahead
Thank
and finish,
you so
and then
much.
Teresa Kadri,
As
you
I
can
was
go
saying,
next.
when seniors have to choose between heating and eating, while the board of Hydro One gives themselves a raise of $25,000 each, there's something wrong. And we need to look at that. And we need to make sure that the people of Ontario and the people of Carleton can actually afford to pay their hydro rates.
The fact is that hydro, relative to other jurisdictions in the world, is actually surprisingly cheap.
Yes.
Yeah, we're more expensive than Quebec
Yes.
and Manitoba, but we're significantly less than most states in the U.S., and we're actually less than half the price of Europe. So the issue is not the price per se, but the way it's wasted. So, but
Well,
in
there's
both
a problem
cases,
when
the
we're comparing
privatization
Ontario
by the
to other
Liberals
countries. We need to
is a
compare
disaster.
Ontario to other
But
provinces because we're all part of Canada.
we
And
actually
that's the
can.
problem.
companies
Let's-
compare ourselves
Charlie can.
internationally. When companies choose to move, they do it on price. What we really need, the best savings, is not to make hydro cheap, because we know how humans are. If you make it cheap, people just use more power. Actually, a higher price, if you help people with energy conservation, will actually save people money. Because when the price hurts, people change their behavior, but they need assistance. They need help to insulate their homes, to get efficient cars, efficient furnaces, and that's a Green Party approach. We're not going to make things cheap because there's no such thing as cheap. There's no such thing as free. You have to pay the real price, but we're going to help you be able to afford it by making energy efficiency a top need. And on top of that, that creates lots and lots of good paying jobs. Thank you.
I'd like to address the 200,000 jobs that you've created. I find it funny that the Liberals say that they created 200,000 jobs when they destroyed or shipped out 300,000 manufacturing jobs. And manufacturing jobs are what create wealth. You don't create wealth by giving a service in a coffee shop or giving a service in a restaurant. You create wealth when you manufacture and create something that wasn't there before.
Well,
That's creation of wealth.
I personally
And
take
wealth,
that as an insult.
well,
As a
I
small,
hope you do.
as
I
a
hope
small,
you do,
as a
because
small, as a small business owner for over 20 years.
40 years for me.
You know, I think that is really important that the small businesses are looked after, and you can't put somebody down because they're serving coffee. It's a job. It's an entrepreneur.
I've been in the
It's,
service
you
industry
know,
for 40 years.
yeah,
I had a
yeah,
radiator shop in
yeah.
Embrun, and I've been serving people.
Yeah,
but I've
that's good.
maintained. A car is a
But-
wealth that was created. When you repair it, you maintain wealth. And that's what people are doing right now. They're
But
maintaining
we're
wealth.
look
But
at
the
the
wealth to be
jobs in the
created
high
has to
tech.
come from a manufacturing.
We
And
have-
you've destroyed 300,000 jobs in this province.
No, we've increased it. Look at the unemployment rate. Look at the facts. Let's look at the facts, okay? What we have to concentrate, and when you, the voters, really need to concentrate, are on the facts.
Well, the
Okay?
fact is that
Look-
the Liberals are in third place in the polls, and they're going down. After 15 years, people know the old quote is true. Politicians are like underwear. Doesn't matter what the color, they always get dirty. They've done some good things, they've done some bad things, but it's time. Your choice as a voter is to decide what's their best replacement. If you want somebody who believes in the ideals or somebody who's just going to do cynical things and tell you anything you want to hear. If you want a real government to really lead you, you want a government that will make some tough choices and tough decisions and not tell you that you're going to get a free lunch, because guess what? That's not true. Thank you.
The
Okay.
truth is,
Teresa Kadri, we're going to go back to you for the final 30 seconds on this topic. Go ahead.
Oh, I believe in the people. I believe in bringing people together. I think it's very important to concentrate on our businesses, our farmers, everyone in this province. It's crucial that we care for each other as neighbors, and that's it. Thank you. It's care,
Okay.
not cuts.
All right, thank you. I'm now going to direct a question to the Libertarian candidate, Jean-Serge Buisson, and this is a question that was submitted by a member of the community. In 2020, there will be about 1.4 million Ontarians who are aged over 85. What is the plan to manage this aging group of people's care? How will we look after them in the province of Ontario? What should the plan be?
That's a loaded question. Are you asking me about health care per se? Because
Well, particularly for
the
for
retirement-
older,
the
what's going to be there to support
Yeah.
aging Ontario residents?
I mean, we look at health care in a different manner, but this is retirement. You have old age security, you have Canada Pension Plan, depending which one you're at. If you haven't put any money aside, people have the old age security to rely on. But Canada Pension Plan itself has its own system if you've paid into it. If people have no money put aside, and that is where the government, overtaxing and overbearing is preventing people from putting money aside. If we had less bureaucracy, less government, people would have a chance to put money aside and would be able to take care of themselves much better than what they are now.
Okay, it's open to everyone.
I think the problem is much bigger than we're trying to state. One of the problems, the source of the problem is, yes, we have aging demographics, but we tend to have reactive policies that aren't looking forward. In this particular issue, what we've got this past summer, we had 16% of all the beds of Ontario occupied by people who needed to be in long-term care beds and other equivalent facilities, but there was no space for them. So we now have got a chain reaction where we have, instead of not one problem, we now have delays in the hospitals as well. We need to expand and build lots and lots of long-term care facilities, but even more than that, what we need is people to be cared for at home. We need to invest in the training. I know that right now there's actually a shortage of home support workers. My daughter's worked at a home support worker at the Osgood Care Center, and if you want a job, there's a great job for you. Get a job, train at Algonquin College, because there's a great shortage of workers, there's a great shortage of spaces. But what we've also done is done a lot of private, for-profit residences, and that's not what we need. What we need is places to be taken care of, and especially support for families. I've got my mother-in-law living with me at home because I know the best person to take care of my mother-in-law is my wife and myself, and we need to support more families to take care of their loved ones.
The NDP, if they're elected, will create 15,000 new long-term care beds in the next 5 years and put $257 million into long-term care. This will help couples or senior citizens who can't live on their own, because right now there's a huge wait list for people who need to get into long-term care. They're also making tax breaks for senior citizens who want to stay in their homes so that they won't have to pay the taxes until after they move out. These kinds of investments will help long-term, just like my friend at the Green Party was stating. We will see a reduction in the wait times at the hospital because we won't have people taking up beds because they're really waiting for long-term care.
That's a really excellent plan for the NDP, except the problem is that you will not be able to afford it. And the reality is we need a government that's going to be responsible while at the same time taking care of Ontarians. And I find it quite interesting that the Liberals are using the slogan of care over cuts, because that is taken directly from Ontario doctors who have been campaigning against the Liberal government for at least 2 years, and their website is Care Not Cuts, because the Liberals have been cutting healthcare services for years. And even a few years ago, they cut 700 nursing jobs right here in Ontario. And so the PC plan for the people of Carleton and across Ontario is very simple. We are committed to building 30,000 new long-term care beds, 15,000 of them in the first 5 years, and the next would be in the next 10 years. We're also looking at taking a more proactive approach, because the reality is if we want to keep people and our seniors out of emergency rooms, we need to take care of them from before they get to a point where they need to go there. So we need more PSWs, we need more care providers, we need more beds, we need more access to services, and this is what our government and our party is committed to doing as your future government.
One of the things I'd like to iterate is that when we look at being cost effective, it's really, really important to consider the fact that when people do things privately at home, it's much more cost effective. Having the government doing everything, unfortunately, while we'd like to, is really not going to work, and because we can't afford it. I would agree with the concerns on that. So we have to find cost-effective methods of supporting people at home. That means having visiting nurses and having support workers who are trained, and they can be at home. That means, and what we want to focus is on families as maximum as possible, taking care of their things, moving them out of the hospitals. But we can't do it. We can't do everything. What we're also seeing is not just, this is one issue that's a shift within the healthcare system, but there's more shifts. One of the big ones is mental health. My wife is a mental health nurse and a professor at Algonquin, and I know that right now the number of health care, but the budget that is dedicated to mental health is only about 6%, but it's 15% of the demand in terms of cost. We need greatly increase in mental health costs, because once again, when we help those people before they get really sick, we're actually saving money. So one of the tricks we need to do is target that money to figure out how can we be, with our limited resources, because remember, we're always living within our limits, how do we help those people in a changing healthcare system, A, aging people, and B, significant increases in mental health, and we need to direct that within our budgetary limits, admitting, though, that we can't do everything. So we're going to work within our limits as the Green Party to meet that changing and adapt to that future. Thank you.
I agree with you that mental health is definitely a big issue, especially in Carleton when you're looking at the more rural areas where people have lack of proper transportation or infrastructure to get the services that they need. And the Ontario PC Party has committed $1.9 billion across Ontario to help with the mental health care issues that we're having. And the good news is the money that we provide will be matched federally. So all in all, we are actually looking at $3.8 billion to be committed to mental health for the people of Ontario.
So you're saying you've already talked to the federal government and they're not going to do that, Goldie. That's pretty interesting. Our government is making unprecedented investments in mental health and addictions, and an investment of $2.1 billion. And we want to talk about seniors and the mental anguish that they go through. Well, I looked after my mother with dementia. She had diapers. She had a wheelchair. I changed my powder room to a shower. Excuse me, as you said to me, excuse. Okay? So, I mean, I looked after her. I had a caseworker come in. I had occupational therapists come in. And you know what? Care is there. We need to invest a little bit more in it.
Okay.
Well, doctors and nurses disagree.
We're going to stop there.
I have 5 doctors in my family.
I asked you the question, so you get the final 30 seconds on this. Go ahead.
Well, as you can see, everybody's talking about government being the answer, but they're the problem. Again, it comes down to people being able to make enough savings during their working years to be able to take care of their retirement come the end of the year, or come the year of their working time. I mean, if the average person can put $10,000 a year ahead in a bank with interest for 30 years, they got plenty of money to be taking care of their needs when they become elderly and need help.
Okay, thank you. The next question is for Goldie Gamari, the Progressive Conservative candidate. Your leader has promised to reduce gas prices in Ontario by 10 cents a litre, in part by eliminating carbon pricing. How specifically will you recover the lost revenue associated with that, and what will you do instead of carbon pricing to ensure that Ontario meets its emissions targets?
Well, Mark, the reality is that when you look at carbon pricing, the Liberals said that the carbon tax and the billions of dollars that would be used towards reducing emissions or creating better infrastructure would stay in Ontario. But the reality is the billions of dollars that have been wasted on the carbon tax so far have gone outside of Ontario to California and Quebec. And so we have not actually reduced emissions at all in Ontario since the carbon tax was introduced, because what's happening is businesses are simply participating in the auction and they're buying off their credits. So what we need to do is look at real solutions and real future progress, because right now farmers in Carleton are struggling. And I have met with several farmers who are paying hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in energy costs.
It's open to everyone now.
You supported the carbon tax.
Yes.
Over and over and over again. Yeah. You posted that you thought the carbon tax was great, as long as it was used to go to poor people. You wanted a wealth redistribution plan.
Yes.
You supported Patrick Brown's carbon tax, and now that you've got a leader in there who's changed his mind, you've changed your mind. Because you don't represent people, you represent yourself and your leader. You represent Toronto. And let's be honest, the carbon tax won't have an effect, because you don't, by putting a price, it's not nearly enough to actually make a difference in behavior. The gas and the fuel are things that people need to drive their business. You raise the price, you do not help them, you simply make them poorer. You don't change their behavior. Those farmers in Carleton, and I grew up around them and working with them, they need that fuel. They need that fuel to heat their homes, to grow the crops, to build their businesses. And you guys don't have a plan to fix that, and you don't know what you're going to do. You supported it.
I have never supported the carbon tax. If you're talking about comments that I made as a university student, well, the reality is
when you said you were going to run.
I'm 33 years old.
Yes.
When you said you were going to run.
Excuse me, let me finish, sir. I'm 33 years old. And like many other millennials, I like to debate online. And the way that I learn, especially given that I'm a lawyer, is I like to debate issues. So just because I take a position and debate it doesn't necessarily mean that it's what I'm supporting. And quite frankly,
since you've been a candidate, you said you did. You did. You said you would implement it differently than Patrick wanted it, but you support it. But you support. Yes, you did.
Well, quite frankly, not having reducing carbon prices is absurd. It's really part of a climate change denial strategy. I will agree with my compatriot here who says that the carbon taxes are too low. And actually, it's not a carbon tax. Ontario has a cap and trade system, which is completely different. We do need a carbon tax. My daughter is at Carleton. She just wrote a paper which looked at the fact that if you want to change behavior, as my esteemed colleague said, you need an increase of actually about 10 times what we're talking about. We need a huge tax, and that will actually save people money. It doesn't seem like it, but what that will
change behavior on necessities.
You can, because the necessities.
Tax
there are
water,
electric cars out there. There are electric buses. There are electric motorcycles out there. There are electric trucks. That's going to happen anyway. The leader right now in the world is China. They now have more electric buses than all of the top 10 American cities. They decided they can do it. The same thing with electric cars. We have lots of electricity in Canada, so we're blessed with lots of electricity. As long as we continue integrating the electricity with Quebec and Manitoba, who have a money.
Let's go back to the people.
It's carbon free, but you know what? The fact is, this program is working in several ways. I'm getting triple glazed windows right now. The government, in their program, is putting in triple pane windows, $500 a window. You should go out and get it. It's a great thing. It makes your house super energy efficient. Your window now becomes efficient as a wall. So that some of that tax money is being directed constructively. And it's a baby step in the right direction, but it is in the right direction. But we have to go much, much further, because this climate change denial has to stop. It's reality. It's true. Short-term pain for long-term gain, but the technology now exists. I have 2 electric cars at home. I drive a Chevy Bolt, and I
How
also
many
have
families and businesses are you going to ruin for those little baby steps?
You have to help them get there.
You got to be pragmatic.
Of course, absolutely. It's all about the transition.
Yeah, well, this is not the way you do it. It's a massive change. It's a tax on everything.
It's going to happen anyway. It's going to happen. So it's a matter of, do you do it proactively or are you going to be reactive? The reality is that's the way the world is going. Deal with it. Other places in the world have done things. They're going to have a net zero economy. California, Sweden, Costa Rica, no net zero carbon by 2050. They're not doing it just to be do-gooders. They're doing it because it's going to be good for their economy, good for their health, good for the environment, and they're going to make more money, because if they're ahead on the curve, they're going to be selling products to us, and all our money will go to them when we realize, oops, a diesel truck is over.
Let's give other people an opportunity to get into the discussion here.
It's a done deal.
Be a stockbroker.
Mark Dixon, did you want to go ahead?
For the record, I'm totally opposed to the carbon tax. When most of us hear of cap and trade, carbon tax, it's just another excuse for the government to collect another tax. It's really a fact that it's not going to affect carbon emissions.
Quiet, please. Go ahead.
And, excuse me, if you should elect me, my purpose is to reduce taxes for the industry, for the people. We must reduce taxation and encourage growth, economic growth and business by reducing taxes.
I think we have to also concentrate on the carbon tax and the pollution. We have to concentrate on the people. We have to concentrate on premature deaths, the seniors who suffer asthma, lung diseases. We have to look at the whole picture here. We had acid rain going back. You know, we don't have smog days anymore. We need to ensure that we have clean air to breathe, and that's essential. So really, it's all about our environment and how to preserve it, to keep it clean. Working with farmers, I'm willing to work with farmers. I'll do a lot. There's other ways that we can recoup the losses that you feel, but we will do something for you.
We all want clean air and water,
and we do need
a punitive tax on everything that just makes people poor is not constructive.
I'm listening to the people of the community. I'm listening to the individuals. I want to make sure that things are healthy for people, and I'm willing to work with the farmers and any business owner. As a business owner for over 20 years, I can relate, and let me tell you, there's things that you can do to change policy, amend policy, and to work with the people that you're representing, and that's what I plan on doing.
Okay, Goldie Gamari, I asked you the question, so you get the final 30 seconds.
Thank you. It's very nice that everyone here talks about wanting to work with people and willing to work with farmers. But the reality is I have been working with and I have been listening to people of Carleton for the past 2 years. And in fact, back in October of 2017, I started my Carleton Conversation series. Every month we talked about a different issue. And in October, in North Gore, we had 60 farmers show up and we discussed the issues, and that's something I've been doing and I will continue to do for the people of Carleton.
All right, thank you. Let's move on to the next topic, and I'm going to direct this question to Jay Tizik of the Ontario Party. We touched on it briefly already, electricity prices in Ontario. It's a big issue for Ontario residents. Where would you set the pay for Hydro One executives and board members, and what specifically can be done to lower electricity prices in Ontario?
Okay, see, I'm glad you brought that up because there's a number of issues with the responses that my friends here gave earlier, and they're all talking about Band-Aids. They're all talking about borrowing. Even Doug Ford's plan, firing one guy at one of the companies that make up our our power generation is not going to do anything. The auditor said that we were overcharged by $37 billion, and the idea that firing one guy who makes $6 million is going to save this, it's nothing. It's just an attempt to give people something they can feel good about. There is a huge problem with our hydro, absolutely, and it starts with these global adjustment fees. That's the largest part of any bill, and most people probably understand where that comes from, but a lot of these bad deals signed by the Liberals, which hand over our money to producers of energy that we don't need because they're doing it.
That's open to everyone now. You can keep going if you want, but it'll now be part of the
lower
debates.
Prices are a great thing, and there's ways to do it. One of the first steps the Green Party would do is shut down the nuclear plant in Pickering. It's the oldest in North America, over 50 years. It was only slated to last 30 years. It's the most inefficient plant in North America. Right now there's discussions. We would shut it down. That would save us at least $1.1 billion a year. We would then import power from Quebec. So it turns out that Quebec and Ontario, in spite of our rocky political history, have a perfect marriage in terms of electricity. They have a deficit of power in the winter, and we have an excess to sell them. In the summer, they have an excess, and we have a deficit. We have a marriage made in heaven with Quebec with very cheap power. On top of that, what we've also got to do is add wind and solar. There's this real hate on for wind and solar as if it is to blame for everything. It represents less than 1% of our power, and it turns out that the huge cost overruns didn't come from wind and solar because they only get paid in their contracts when they produce. The real catastrophe in the contracts done by the Liberal government was with the gas plants. The gas plants, all 90 of them, had guaranteed rates of sale. So no matter what the demand was, the Liberals signed a deal, a real sweetheart deal, where they would get paid no matter what they produced. And some of those plants only working at 25% of capacity. Unfortunately, we're stuck with those for the next 20 years. But we can still do lots of things to reduce demand. The cheapest way to reduce prices is not to build more stuff, it's to reduce consumption, to make things more energy efficient. And we would do major investments in energy efficiency, including something you might not have ever heard of, something called the microgrid and the smart grid. This is a system moving everywhere in the world where what you do is you rely, rather than on big central plants and big distribution systems, which are expensive and centralized.
I'm just going to let other people get in.
You'll hear more
there's
later.
a limited amount of time, and there's 8 candidates, so if anyone else wants to jump in here.
Well, I have residents from the Stormont Dundas area who have told me that 3 solar farms have gone bankrupt. Now, I'm only relying on hearsay, but if solar farms are going bankrupt, it's because the subsidies are being cut out from the U.S. corporations that own them. So if green energy is so good, why couldn't it survive on its own? The only way green energy will do any headway in this economy is if it's subsidized to the hilt. And it just doesn't work.
I would disagree with that. I agree that the Ontario program was executed very badly with subsidies, but in the rest of the world, for example, Saudi Arabia has put in this massive farm where their cost per kilowatt hour is less than 2 cents per kilowatt hour. That's no subsidies. So the trick is to do things properly.
What school of economy tells you that reducing demand will lower the prices? I mean, supply.
Because what you then do, you don't have to build new plants. We have a lot of aging
they thought that with the
infrastructure.
city. They said people are using too much water. Let's reduce the amount of water they're using. And so they did that. But then they found out the cost of producing and supplying that water didn't change. So what they had to do was charge everyone who used it more. And that's what would happen.
No,
if we made these changes you're suggesting. That's not even basic economics.
Courtney Potter, I think you were trying to get in.
The problem with hydro prices is the privatization of Hydro One. We need to cap private profits on hydro. The NDP would do this by getting rid of the time of use charges and cutting back on, and eliminating delivery charges to rural and First Nations areas. We could cut hydro prices by 30%, and buying back pieces of Hydro One would only make it go down even further.
Well, I'd like to respectfully disagree with my honorable opponent over here in terms of time of use charges. That particular thing should actually be accelerated. What we have, one of the big problems with electricity is what's called peak demand. And so you've got a flatline production, especially when we're 60% nuclear. Nuclear plants always make the same power. When you have a peak, you have massive costs, and that's when we have to import power for that spike. Yeah. What time of use does is it shunts that excess demand at those peaks into the evening. The fact is those
let's make sure we give everybody else a chance to participate in this discussion.
Even more so.
Thank you. Either of you at the end want to get in on the discussion? Go ahead.
Thank you. Politicians can debate back and forth. The bottom line is, in the riding of Carleton, there's an overwhelming concern simply with hydro rates. There's also a very deep concern and resentment paying the CEO multi-million dollars for a salary and then the golden handshakes. This is unacceptable. This is a waste of taxpayers' money, your hard-earned taxes and dollars. There must be accountability. We need good, strong, frugal conservatives who will implement a cost-effective program. And the bottom line, we must reduce the cost of electricity for the average household as well as for the businesses. Businesses are leaving this province because of the cost of doing business. We've got to have a situation where the necessary steps are taken to have accountability for where the money is going and within a budget. Thank you. Okay, go ahead.
I take issue with the negative comments regarding nuclear power. If my opponent in the Green Party says that 60% of Ontario's nuclear power is, 60% of Ontario's power is from nuclear sources, how can we realistically phase out this power in a cost-effective and quick way when Canadian nuclear power is known around the world to be safe and
my honourable
high
opponent
quality?
Didn't listen to me when I said it's simply the Pickering plant. I didn't say the Darlington plant. I was very specific. And the details really matter. These broad generalizations are really a disaster. Going down, when you research, and I've spent hours reading this stuff, you have to look at, we're only talking Pickering.
Thank you. I asked the question to Jay Tizik. You have the final 30 seconds on this.
Okay. No one here is actually talking about the real issue of why the hydro is expensive. They talk, because let's be honest, we actually have very inexpensively produced hydro and we have access to abundant energy. The real problem is these terrible contracts that have been signed over 20 years. And you're signed on to the Patrick Brown platform, and Doug can't really change much of it, and it does nothing to address it. Both the Liberals and the Conservatives just want to borrow money to slightly reduce for a short time. Nobody up here except me will tell you that the problem is those bad 20-year contracts where we're paying 8 times the price of energy.
Thank you.
We got to cancel.
All right. Actually, no, that's the end of that section. Thank you very much. We're going to move on to the next question now. I'm going to direct this to Gordon Kubek, the Green Party candidate. Polls show that a majority of Ontario residents are opposed to running deficits. Should the next government commit to running balanced budgets so as not to add to Ontario's already large debt?
You know, that's a great question. I really thank you for that. In my opening statement, I made a point that our provincial debt is unsustainable. Green Party's philosophies were very much the old, what in the past Ontario had the red Tories. We're fiscally conservative but socially progressive. We agree that any future burden to the future, whether it's an environmental burden because of climate change or a burden because of the debt, is catastrophic and morally reprehensible. We would make sure that we always run a budget that is balanced over time. Obviously not right away, we have to get there, but we agree that we need to stop the budget. As a matter of fact, we need to follow Quebec's lead. Quebec used to always be the bad boy in the block with deficits. Well, for the past several years, they've been actually decreasing their debt and using their deficits to actually pay down their debt. We need to do the same.
All right, it's open to everyone.
Well, Quebec gets $9 billion in support in transfer payments every, they get 50% of all transfer payments every time. So it's not hard to balance your budget when you're getting the rest of the country helping you finance it.
Well, unfortunately, as you know, we've become a have-not province in Ontario as well over the past several years because of our economy and misspending and mismanagement. But the real issue is when Keynes invented this concept of deficit, it was only intended for the bad times. So when you have a bad day, you spend money to stimulate. When you have a good day, you don't. You pull back and you do that. We haven't done that. Actually, since 1965, I checked this out, only 80% of the time governments have run a deficit. It doesn't matter if it's NDP, Conservatives, or Liberals. They've been addicted, just totally addicted to deficit spending because you know what? It wins votes. You, the voter, unfortunately have been hoodwinked into that, and it's been hard for the political parties because it's hard to say no to you. When you want more, you get more.
I want to make sure we hear from all the candidates during this discussion. So does anybody else want to talk about debt and deficits?
Well, go ahead.
Okay, I believe that it's really important to put things in perspective. I mean, if you purchase a house for $350,000 and the mortgage is about $130,000, I'm sure you've heard it before, that's a 37% debt to GDP ratio. I mean, if the Ontario government is investing in the people and the care of the people, then that's the same. But the only thing is with a home that what you're purchasing it probably for a 25-year mortgage. And the Ontario government is 6 years and they will have a balanced budget.
The Ontario government was supposed to have a balanced budget this year, and that's not happening.
They did.
No, it's not.
They did. They delivered 8 balanced budgets, including 2018 and 2018. Well, it's the truth. Check it out.
If I may now, before I was interrupted, the Ontario government said that they were going to have a balanced budget, but they did not, and I find it quite shocking that they are actually fighting with the Auditor General, who is an independent ombudsman who is there to provide an objective overview of the budget and the platform. And if you actually look at what the Auditor General has said, we are not running a balanced budget, it's a deficit, and the Liberals have not even properly identified the total amount of that deficit. And when you're in a province that is running the largest subnational debt in North America, there's a problem.
Oh, it's the largest subnational debt in the world. Don't kid yourself. Yeah. Everybody in Ontario owes $25,000, whether you're just born or if you're 85. So it's going to bite us big time. So it's only a matter of day. Right now, just the interest on that debt is about 10% of our budget. So it's the fourth items. We've got health, education, social services, and then interest on that $348 billion. Watch what happens when the interest rate goes up. It's not going to be a pretty picture. I would agree with my Conservative friend that it's a big issue, but the problem is that, and if you look at Conservative history, they've run deficits almost as much as every other political party because making hard choices is hard. Doug Ford is proposing to reduce income taxes. He's going to save you gas at the pumps and simultaneously slay the deficit. Well, you know what? That's not possible. Tough choices have to be made. And in the past, you, the voter, have been giving these options and told false promises. And you know what? That time is over. Tough choices have to be made. And we in the Green Party are willing to make those tough choices.
Just want to intervene so that everybody has an equal opportunity to speak.
Go ahead. First off, actually you said a few good things. No, honestly, it's time for tough choices. And these parties are just continually saying we're going to throw more money at every problem. We all know it, and this is not complicated. As much as they like to, Teresa's talking about debt to GDP ratios, stuff like that. It's a simple philosophy, and it's about a philosophy on how we run our government. We know that if we ran our households the way they're running government, we'd all be homeless. Well, guess what? That's the same thing that's going to happen here. We pay $1 billion in interest payments alone. And as he pointed out, and that's monthly, as he pointed out that if those interest rates go up, which they will, it's over. So there are tough choices that need to be made, but none of these parties are even willing to address it or to look at them or to try. And that's what we're about, is just getting this debt off our backs and restoring the sanity to our budgets. They want to keep spending to buy your votes.
I'm not quite sure what spending you're talking about, Mr. Tizik, but we have committed to putting more money back in your pockets. We have committed to bringing jobs back to Ontario. And we want to look at what we can do to help our farms, our manufacturing industry, because the reality is those 300,000 jobs that were lost, we need those back. We need to look at the north. We need to look at the rural sector. And there are things that we can do to bring jobs back. And when you have people working, when you have people working and you have people being, contributing to the economy, that's how you can pay off the debt, is by encouraging more work and stimulating the economy and putting more money back into the system.
But as long as that debt looms and continues to grow, Everybody with half a cent knows that the taxes are going to continue to increase until they're unsustainable. No business wants to long-term. Yeah, by borrowing more. But you're saying we're going to give to this service, you're going to give to this.
We have committed to reducing taxes.
And all independent people say you can't pay for your program. So it's kind of pointless what you commit to at this point. But the reality is, if we don't address that debt, no business is going to come here.
The reality is
taxes will go up and up
tax.
until nobody makes anything.
All right, we'll stop there. Gordon Kubek, I address the question to you. You get the final 30 seconds.
Well, I'd like to paint a picture for you. I've been a teacher for years. Imagine that I got my cup of water here, and imagine I poured it in my hand. The solution to this economic problem, that's your hard-earned tax dollars. The solution that the NDP and the left-wingers has, we're going to squeeze everything so hard, and that's how we're going to solve all the problem. All the water comes gushing out. The other problem is, oh, we're going to have laissez-faire. The Conservatives say, we're not going to do anything. And guess what? Your water is just going to gush out. Either way, either extreme is that the only way that we're going to do things is target our spending in sensible matters, that is investments, not just spending for spending's sake.
Thank you very much. Let's move to the closing statements now. We've wrapped up the debate portion of our telecast, and we're going to do the closing statements in the reverse order of the opening statements, which was drawn at random earlier. So we are going to start with Evan Nightingale, who is representing the None of the Above party. You have 60 seconds. Go ahead.
Today we heard a lot of interesting ideas on how to build Ontario's future. But we must remember that none of these promises are guaranteed as long as MPPs are commanded by their party leadership and special interests instead of only to their local constituents. In the 2014 Ontario election, the sum total of abstained votes, declined, spoiled, and unmarked ballots held the highest percentage of eligible voters. Recent history tells us that Ontarians have been thoroughly and consistently disappointed by every preceding government dating back to the early 1990s. We need an option for the disaffected voter. We need a secret, no-candidate option on our ballots that would initiate a by-election, if they were to win, that would disqualify any defeated candidate from running again in that by-election. The None of the Above party will prioritize constituent outreach and advocacy above all else. And finally, I would like to remind the viewers that if they stay home on election day, the people who they disagree with will win. Thanks for listening.
Okay, thank you. Mark Dixon, independent candidate, you're next.
Thank you. And as an independent, I feel that I can be, upon being elected, I can truly work with all parties, particularly the party in power. I am a member of the Progressive Conservative Party of Ontario, as well as the Federal Conservative Party of Canada. I fully intend, your mark for mark will mean that you're giving me the mandate and direction to work very closely in support of Doug Ford and the Conservative Party, but I'm not handcuffed to whip voting. That's extremely important. As an independent, I can truly represent and work effectively for this constituency. I was born here, raised here, worked here. I have a good idea, having worked for federal government, worked for not one but two federal cabinet ministers.
Okay, that's time. Thank you. Courtney Potter, the NDP candidate, you're next.
I became a paralegal to help ensure that everyone had equal access to the justice system, and I am completing my bachelor's degree in labor studies so that I can defend the rights of workers to collective bargaining. As your representative, I would advocate to ensure residents of Carleton and Ontario as a whole had equal access to public services. Under the Liberal and Conservative governments, these services have deteriorated or disappeared. We need to improve our healthcare system, our education, and our transportation. That's why I'm running for MPP as the NDP candidate. I will work with the NDP to shorten wait times in healthcare by ensuring everyone has access to prescription drugs and preventative care. I will work to open more schools and reduce class sizes. The NDP will fund these programs through fairer tax plans, not cuts to other services. It's time for a change for the better. So on June 7th, I ask for your support and your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Gordon Kubek, the Green Party candidate, go ahead.
It's been a lot of fun. Thanks for sharing this time with us all. To live within our economic and environmental limits, companies and people have to pay the real price for goods and services, a price that includes any damage to the environment, a price that does not burden the future. That's why committing to a net zero carbon economy by 2050, countries like Sweden, Costa Rica, and the state of California have committed to makes economic and environmental sense. While we're the party of the future, we still support the old-fashioned idea that government should be fiscally conservative but socially progressive. So, if you're one of those voters who believes that government has a vital role in preserving our civil society and public institutions, but don't think that adding to our disastrous, world-leading debt is a good idea, well, you're a Green Party voter, you just didn't know it. So I challenge you to vote for policies that you know in your head and feel in your heart will make for a better Ontario. Vote for the Greens on June 7th. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up from the Ontario Party, Jay Tizik.
We've seen more and more, especially lately, that decisions that affect our lives and on a deeply personal level are not being made by the people who are affected by them. They're being made by central offices and back rooms in Toronto. And we've seen that with the Liberals, how they've implemented an agenda, but more importantly, we've seen it recently with the PCs. During this election cycle, Patrick Brown did 64 appointments of 126 ridings, and since Doug has taken office, Doug Ford, he's appointed 11 more. And Goldie's one of those appointments from Patrick Brown's time. This is a government in waiting that doesn't want your opinions. They've made their decisions about what they're going to do in the back rooms, and now they're going to force it on you. The way we're going to fix the problems this province is facing is by trusting you, the voter, by restoring your voice. You know what you need to grow your business, to raise your family. You need someone who's going to go there and get it for you. That's it.
Thank you. Goldie Gamari is the Progressive Conservative candidate. Go ahead.
Well, once again, thank you, Mark and Rogers TV, for inviting all of us to be here today to debate the issues. I was nominated on November 5th, 2016, after 6 months of campaigning and going door to door. And since then, I have been campaigning hard every day, earning your votes, earning your support. And with Doug Ford as Premier, we are going to bring jobs back to Ontario. We're going to reduce hydro rates. We're going to end hallway healthcare. We're going to bring responsibility, accountability, and trust back to government. And we're going to put more money in your pockets. And if you want to learn more about me, you can go to my website. It's www.votegoldie.ca. And I hope that I can count on your vote this coming election on June 7th and be your voice at Queen's Park. Thank you.
Thank you. Jean-Serge Buisson is the Libertarian candidate. Go ahead, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. When corporations find that they've become inefficient and they're losing money, they do what's necessary. They cut into their bureaucracy. We have an overbloated bureaucracy. The Liberals hired 300,000 people under Dalton McGuinty to work in the government. Why? There's a deficit in our budget, and that's one of the reasons why we have an overbloated bureaucracy. People are not happy with the debt. Well, it's there because, again, of the inefficiency of our last 15 years of the Liberal government. So the only reason that the Libertarians want to reduce government is to deal with the debt, stop the deficit, and leave more money in your pocket, as the Conservatives said, but you're going to have to look at the debt first. And there's only one way to do it, is to cut the government on the size that it is at now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Finally, the Liberal Party candidate, Teresa Kadri. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you to all my fellow candidates. It's always a pleasure to listen to everyone's opinions and learn from you. In all of my work as an entrepreneur, a chair of numerous associations and charities, the one thing that I can assure you is that every person matters to me. This continues to be the core of everything that I do. I believe that through teamwork and great things can be accomplished. I have worked in Carleton for 45 years. I have been raised in Carleton, and I can relate and listen to you. I personally want to fight for our children, young adults, families, businesses, farmers, and our seniors. I will work with my fellow MPPs to introduce improvements sooner rather than later. My expertise lies in actually doing things, helping people and changing lives. You will always know where I stand, and I will always fight for Carleton riding. I believe in bringing people together. I need you beside me when I'm your MPP.
Thank you very much.
I will never forget.
That brings to an end our telecast. Thank you to all the candidates in Carleton Ward for participating in the debate. And I'll remind our viewers that we'll have live local election results on June the 7th on Rogers TV and on 1310 News Radio starting at 9 o'clock. Thanks for watching the local campaign.